All, this is Dr. Mubin Sayed. Welcome to one more show. So, the discussion today is a letter that is written by researchers from Harvard Medical College or Harvard University School of Medicine to New England Journal of Medicine. It was printed yesterday. And let me show you the letter's title, which speaks for itself. So, I'll look at Dr. Bean in a second. Neutralization escape by SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variants, subvariants BA.2.12.1, BA.4 and BA.5. So here, many of us would just simply say, all right, they're talking about escape, so we have escape. But that's not the whole story. This is important to say neutralization escape. As soon as you say neutralization escape, what you are implying is there is no more efficacy of the vaccine or infection to these subvariants. This also means that calling these the subvariants of Omicron is also wrong because these have become new strains that have gotten out of the capacity of these vaccines or previous infections to control these variants. Okay, so now before we actually look at the data, it would be interesting to understand how to anchor that data, how to have a reference point. So I'm going to show you the reference point. This is a study that we discussed yesterday. Well, let me back up for a second, even before we go into the data. What this letter has said, 27 patients who were infected with BA.1 and BA.2 Omicron, 27 patients who were vaccinated, even boosted. BA.4 and 5 have been able to escape neutralization by the antibodies from these patients. So you could dismiss this all by saying 27 small numbers, but you will not be able to dismiss it because the BA.4 and 5 have escaped these antibodies for all of those 27 each. So escape has occurred for neutralization. That is the problem. So now let's look at how to look at this data. So this is a study I discussed yesterday. Effect of previous infection and vaccination on symptomatic Omicron infection. What they did was, in this study from Qatar, they saw that the effect of vaccination on the Omicron. And why do I go back to this study today? I want to show you that when vaccination is 6 months old, so if I got vaccinated 6 months ago and you expose me today, what is the efficacy of that vaccination of 6 months old? That is what I want to show you from here because this data is not present there. So here, if I go to this diagram, this is a very interesting diagram. What they're showing here, let's look at the top one. Effectiveness of previous infection and BioNTech vaccine against symptomatic Omicron infections. We did this discussion yesterday. That is not the point. The point is to look at this. This green one, these three. Let's see if I can increase this in size here. These three numbers are 2-dose vaccine over 6 months, the efficacy. So look at this. After 6 months or more than 6 months later, the efficacy is in negative number. This is what I will like you to keep in mind. Similarly, if you see here, this is the mRNA 1273 Moderna. Efficacy after 6 months of 2 doses is minus 10.3. So basically no efficacy because you cannot even take that minus to say this is a good number or reliable number. These are crossing unity, so they are unreliable. They are useless numbers. Why? Because there is no efficacy. Now, here is the delicate point that is going to be used in the other part of the talk in today's study or the letter. If the efficacy after 6 months is not present, Then whatever are the antibody titers in these patients after 6 months, these titers will also mean nothing. So let's say my efficacy after 6 months is 0 against the variants. And if you check my antibodies, their level is 100, then you can say that that 100 level of antibodies is useless, actually harmful. And I did that discussion 2 days ago, that when a vaccine or infection generated antibody is not able to neutralize, then it will still connect with the variant or the spike protein or somewhere on the variant and still activate the complement system and cause inflammation. And that inflammation, if it becomes overwhelming, can cause a severe reaction. So take away from this part of the context. 6 months later, whatever is the antibody titer amount, that is useless because vaccine efficacy we are seeing here is useless. Now let's go to this study. I'm going to show you this study with my drawings. So these are our gifts for humanity. And here is what is happening. Current vaccines, and there is vaccine companies, administrations, there are people to be held responsible for this, that as the variants were mutating, they were still trying to sell the older vaccines and just saying, take more boosters. The result was the vaccines were not a fit, and this became totally out of fit now. Current vaccines and previous infection are not able to offer neutralizing antibodies. Neutralizing is very important. Against BA.2.12.1, let's call it BA.3 for our discussions, BA.2.12.1, BA.4 and BA.5. BA.2.12.1 is the dominant variant in the US. So if I go here to CDC's site, and if you see this red one, this, sorry, so this red one is BA.2.12.1. So that is a dominant variant in the US. And BA.4 and BA.5 are the dominant at this time in South Africa. Now, also to have a clinical context so we don't become too nervous, the BA.2.12.1 has been becoming dominant for a lots of months. So if you see here, this is the 4th month, and then this is the 5th month, and now we are in the 6th. So it has been growing. And so whatever clinical outcomes you're seeing, these are valid outcomes. Now going back here. So how bad it is? The first thing, good news. I want to start with some good news. Good news is that BA.4 and 5 or 12.1 are not, at least so far from the data, they're not more lethal. They're supposed to be not more transmissible, but if they're not more transmissible, then how would they dominate the previous parent? So they are, of course, a little more transmissible from the other parent, but they are so far not more lethal. And we can see that from this observation, that we have more cases, but the death rates are not high. Now the bad news, or the concern, whichever way you want to put it. The bad news is this. What they did was, these Harvard researchers, they took blood samples from 27 vaccinated and boosted patients, 3 doses, and another 27 who were infected, right? Now, vaccinated and boosted and infected, the infected one were infected on a median 29 days ago. The range was 2 days to 113 days when they took their samples. And what they did was, they took these cohorts, these groups, they took their blood samples from where they took their antibodies. Or you can say that they took the blood samples, they exposed that blood to the pseudovirus, then the cells made antibodies, and they saw what would these antibodies do. So they could generate antibodies from both groups. Now what they did was, they exposed the pseudoviruses of various variant kind to these blood samples to see what kind of response is there. And here is what they saw. What did they expose it to? They had the pseudovirus made up of the spike protein from the Wuhan, or the original ancestor. Then they had Omicron variant built pseudovirus, BA.1, BA.2, BA.2.12.1, and then BA.4 and BA.5. They had pseudoviruses of all of these. So imagine you take my blood, let's say I got vaccinated. You take my blood sample and you pour that, parts of it or cells, on all of these viruses and then see the reaction. So what did they see? They saw the median neutralization antibody titer to these pseudoviruses. So we are talking now vaccinated individuals' blood 6 months after their 2-dose immunization, and their response, that blood, the cells in there, their response to these pseudovariants. Now check out the antibody titers produced. Median titers were 124 to Wuhan. So let me put it in context because this is important to keep in mind. If I was vaccinated 6 months ago, they took my blood and they put the cells from my blood, they put them on Wuhan variant. And they saw what kind of antibodies titers did my cells make. So that was 124. And then against the remaining variants, the titers were lesser than 20. Right? So imagine this was useless. These 2 doses after 6 months do nothing. And just like the titers you can see here, 124 or 20, you can now correlate these titers to the 6 months. After 6 months, what happens? Vaccine efficacy is in minus. So if vaccine efficacy is in minus, then these titers that are here are useless titers, correct? Meaning they do not do anything. So keep this in mind now, that this 124 or 20 is useless titer. So 2-dose vaccine against any of them is useless. How about 3-dose? This is 3-dose. 2 weeks after the booster, 2 weeks after the booster. It's not 2 months after or 6 months of protection. We're talking about 2 weeks after the booster. Now, let's say I got a booster. I have not, but let's say I got a booster. Then within 2 weeks, they take my blood sample and my cells, and now they put my cells with these pseudoviruses and see how do my cells respond. And they saw that against the original variant, the antibody response was 5,738 median titer. What does that mean? That means this vaccine is very good to create antibodies or to train the immune systems to produce antibodies against the original Wuhan. Why? Because these vaccines are actually still designed against that thing. How about Omicron? 900. 6.4 times less. Omicron parent. BA.2, 829. 7 times less efficacy. But look at these numbers. 212.1, which is US, 410, and BA.4 and 5, which is yet in South Africa and is projected to be becoming more in the US, 275, or 21 times lesser than the response to Wuhan after 2 weeks of the booster, 3rd dose of vaccine. Now, to put this in context, look at this, 275. And now if we go back here, 124. This number, 275, is very close to 124 in titer language. That means this number, 2 weeks after the booster, the efficacy of the vaccine for these guys is 0 or close to 0. I hope it makes sense. 124 after 6 months, 2 doses. And we saw that was zero efficacy minus efficacy. This number is really very close to 124 compared to close to 5,738. So booster after 2 weeks to the BA.4 and 5 and even to 12 to 1 is almost gone in efficacy. So instead of they saying, the researchers, that, hey, the efficacy is finished, they actually said something else which was not said clearly till today, and that was the variant has escaped neutralization. You could say it in both ways, depends who you are and what do you want to say. You could say the efficacy is reducing, you need to go get another booster if you are in one camp. Or you could say, if you are in the scientific camp and you want to say the truth, you're going to say the variant has escaped. Neutralization escape means escapes. Non-neutralizing antibodies can actually become dangerous. So this is vaccine. Good. Now let's look at the previous infection. So somebody who was infected, how is their blood doing? So now imagine if I was infected. Now they took my blood within 29 days median time, but from anywhere from 2 days to 113 days. And they actually have a table here in which they show for each person, because these are just 27. So for everyone who is infected, they show their complete data over here. For example, the ID number 1, BA.1, dominant variant. This person was 32 years old. She was a female. BioNTech vaccine was given, vaccine primary booster, days from boost, and so on. So if you similarly look at the other tables here as well, you would see the remaining data as well. So this is interesting. Now, those who were infected, how did, when they take, let's say I was infected, within 29 days of my infection, they said, can we have your blood? Yeah, sure. Here is my blood. And now they use the cells from there to expose these pseudo variants to my cells and then see what kind of antibodies am I producing and what are these antibodies able to do. So look at the numbers. This is infection. Look at the numbers. 11,050 against the original one. Compare that to the vaccines 2 weeks after the booster, third dose 2 weeks after, 5,730, almost half. And compare that to 2-dose vaccine, 124. Now, if you put this in context, 410 and 275 after 2 weeks of the booster, third dose against 12, 1 and 4 and 5. I hope now it kind of makes sense that that is negligible titers. So here, infection in this date range, 11,050 against the original variant. BA.1 Omicron, 7040. So now these patients were infected by BA.1 or BA.2, but they were, why do they still have lesser number of antibodies? That is because of the dates. And they're still attacking this guy more better. So 1740 BA.1, 1910 BA.2, 1150 12.1, 590 BA.4, 590 BA.5. Can you see that this 590 is actually very close to this 410 with the second booster 2 weeks, the booster 2 weeks after? So the infection is done better than the vaccines, boosted vaccine as well, but still this is not sufficiently good titers of the antibodies. We're done. It's gone. The capability of a previously infected individual to produce antibodies against BA.4 and 5, neutralizing antibodies, that is gone. Yes, there are the titers here. And you can see that how good or bad these are. These are the number of times the titers are less. And same here for the vaccine. I mean, vaccine is actually even worse. So then, what is the message? So instead of me saying it, because then I would be labeled by both groups in various ways, let me read what researchers wrote. They said, these data show that BA.2, 12.1, which I called BA.3, BA.4 and BA.5 subvariants substantially escape neutralizing antibodies induced by both vaccination and infection. You saw that after the booster, the antibodies induced was almost half of the vaccine infection. So there is still a difference. Moreover, neutralizing antibodies titers against the BA.4 or 5 subvariant, and to a lesser extent against BA.2.12.1 subvariant were lower than the titers against BA.1 and 2 subvariant, which suggests, so what they're saying is that, hey, these numbers are lower than these. If you see here as well, these numbers are smaller than these numbers, which suggests that the SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variant has continued to evolve with increasing neutralizing escape. These findings provide immunological context for current surges caused by the BA.2.12.1, BA.4, and BA.5 subvariants in population with high frequencies of vaccination and BA.1 or BA.2 infection. So Johnson says that it really is not negative efficacy. Of course, negative efficacy would actually mean a damage. However, negative efficacy in this kind of a situation simply means that data was not reliable, meaning there was nothing to see there. Which also doesn't mean that there was any positive efficacy. So Tammy says, Dr. Geert Vanderbosch explained something like this: mass vaccine causes mutation in viral constantly change to survive. Of course, original vaccine won't work. This is not about mass vaccination. It is happening with the infection as well. The virus has been mutating from ever. The only thing is we have not kept up with the virus. Number one, we have not offered the solutions that could be more than the vaccine. By we, I mean the healthcare authorities. And we have actually actively undermined, suppressed, squashed those who are trying to offer help in other ways too. So we did wrong, but it is not this mechanism that they're saying. So Paul says they have memory cells of the old virus. So they said in their letter that we made sure that if somebody is infected with BA.1 or 2, they were not infected before. So at least they tried to make sure that that was the case. Although this number, making antibodies with this titer against the original variant, does seem like a person has some sort of a memory against that. So this is the discussion. My takeaway from this, so now this is my opinion part. You saw the author's opinion part. My opinion part is that as soon as the neutralization is gone, the virus is actually not effective. Now, it could be effective because it is connecting to the remaining parts of the, I said virus, the antibodies or the immune system is not effective anymore. Efficacy could be thought that maybe to the other parts of the virus, when the antibodies were attached, they would hinder it a little bit. However, if it is going to create complement system activation at a mass level because there is no possibility of stopping the virus, then the person could end up with a severe outcome. Now, I want to balance that as well. We saw that study 2 days ago. If we look at that study was that the previous common colds create antibodies against S2, which is almost equal to making non-neutralizing antibodies as you see here. And they said that means that people would develop reactions. But we all, 90% of the patients in their study had common cold antibodies, but not everyone became severe. We are seeing that not everyone becomes severe. So it is not this that anyone who was exposed or vaccinated now is going to become severe, or someone who had cold previously would become severe. But this simply means that efficacy is gone. The remaining outcome could be a nothing or dangerous as well. So this is the discussion. Please do me a favor. Now let me show you Drbeen as well, a site which people have actively tried to shut down and still trying to. So this is drbeen.com. If you would like to have access to another 800-900 lectures and premium quality lectures, then there is a link in this description of this video which gives you one-time fee of under $100, no recurrence, no restriction on the content. All new lectures are added as well, and there are lectures more by doctors more than me. So take advantage of that. If you would like to support it, you could also use PayPal. That is the link in the description as well, or you can buy me a coffee or become Substack member or Drbeen YouTube member as well. So this is the discussion. I saw a question here. Rima says, is this all antibody focused? What about memory cells? So these antibodies are produced by the memory cells. So what is happening is that people who were vaccinated or who were infected, their memory cells are producing antibodies that are non-neutralizing, or the variant has gone past them. So the memory cells do not know what else to do. If I get the variant, BA.4 or 5, then my immune system would process the newer antibodies too. But if you take my blood, then it doesn't have the cells to create new antibodies. They would only produce the antibodies that they were trained for. And these antibodies are useless. So that means BA.4 and 5 and BA.12.1 can act as new infections without any protection from vaccine or the previous infections. So in my opinion, remember when Omicron came in, I said this is SARS-CoV-3. BA.4 and 5 with this quality, if it is reliably reproduced, that this is what's happening, then these guys are now SARS-CoV-4. Because they have the reason its strain is changed compared to variant is that if a variant becomes phenotypically different or clinically different and enough different that the previous methods cannot work with it anymore, then it's actually a new strain. So if we say the previous vaccines cannot work, previous infection cannot work, then it is a new strain. So John says, where are BA.4 and 5 showing in the US? Remember that day Paul discussed that US is still only looking at it from a projection point of view. I don't think that we are very far ahead in actually doing the sequencing of it. So these numbers, again, Paul, I'm holding you responsible for this messaging. These numbers here, BA.5 and BA.4, these are just projections. And the predominant is BA.12.1, this one, the orange one, which our bodies still behave a little better against that compared to 4 and 5. Okay, so John 653, you are asking a question that I cannot answer by putting it out on the screen and responding to it. But generally, I would say yes. So Eddie says, what is happening in the South Africa clinically? I have not seen that part. I'll have to. I was actually kind of avoiding BA.4 and 5 because it just becomes a ball for media to scare people again and say, well, sky is falling. But this letter was interesting because neutralizing antibody escape is a very important thing to keep an eye on. So I had to talk about it. I was actually going to talk about something else. Rima says, is it a new strain like the flu has new strains every flu season? Sure, that is because of the drift and shift. It is similar, yes. Dan Robinson, I think not, but I can't show your question. Okay, so now one last question from you before we continue on to we hang up. That question is this. I have actually also prepared. Sky Frog is here. Sky is saying, I'm Sky, I'm not falling. Very good. Yes. Please keep it balanced with the clinical outcome as well. These variants are out there for 2-3 months now. So if it was really that bad clinically, then we would be seeing it. You're seeing more cases, fine, but you're not seeing more deaths or severity. The question only that is stuck in my head is with those new more cases with BA.4, 5 or BA.12, 1, how about long COVID? If that is pushing long COVID to a greater number as well, or neurological symptoms, then we have a bigger problem. Okay, so with this, um, I have a question. So let me ask this question before I answer KB Usenit's. My question is, I have also prepared one more lecture today, and that lecture is about the methods, foods, diets, and diet lifestyle that would help against brain fog, neurodegeneration, and help produce new neurons. It's a very important thing to know, especially nowadays when there is a neurological symptoms pandemic, either because of vaccine injury or because of the infection as well. Would you like me to do that after this one, or let this video simmer for a few hours and do it later, or do it tomorrow? So I would need your answer there. Now, KB Usenet says, not quite sure how to correctly ask the question, but how far away is Omicron 5 from SARS-CoV-2 original as compared to CoV-1 to CoV-2? So CoV-1 and CoV-2, are you saying CoV-1, CoV-2 being BA.1 and 2? So the Omicron 5, BA.4 and 5 are quite away from BA.1 and 2. And that means they're also quite away from Delta and Wuhan. BA.4 and 5 are almost identical to each other in their severe parts of the RBD type changes. And this, they actually, all of these links are in the description. They actually have the changes here for BA.1 to BA only, and so on. So you could see them. But they are quite, 4 and 5 are quite different from previous parents. Okay, so I saw a comment and I smiled. So M. Gregory says we need new neurons. So I'm going to hang up. Promise me that you would like, subscribe, and share. And if you would like to support this work, there are links in the description. I'm going to hang up and I would see your answer that should we open up another discussion right now and talk about that, or do it tomorrow. Bye for now.